Welcome to Legal Tech Week for November 20th, 2020, in which we discuss the weeks, or maybe the last 2 weeks, because we weren't here last week, top stories in the legal tech and innovation world. I am Bob Ambrose. I write the blog Law Sites and have the podcast Law Next. And our kind of usual suspect panelists here today are... Victoria, you want to introduce yourself? Start off?
Hey everyone, my name is Victoria Hudgins. I'm based in Philadelphia and I write for ALM's Legal Tech News publication, where I write mostly about legal tech news and the intersection of law and technology.
And Joe?
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the podcast Thinking Like a Lawyer, I suppose. I'm happy to be here. It's been a fun week. Am I leaking? I don't want to make sure I'm not.
Victor, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victor Lee. I'm assistant managing editor with the ABA Journal. I cover the business of law and technology. And I promise not to make any My Cousin Vinny references during this session, but I don't know about the whole sweating hair dye thing. I might have to take the fifth on that one.
We don't know if it's hair dye yet, right? Zach?
Hey, everybody. I'm Zach Warren. I'm editor-in-chief of ALM's Legal Tech News, based here out of Minneapolis. And am I the only one who hasn't really watched My Cousin Vinny? I don't think I could make a My Cousin Vinny reference if I tried, if I'm being quite honest.
Yeah, you're the only one. Nikki?
I am Niki Black, the legal technology evangelist with MyCase law practice management software. And as my title suggests, I try to help lawyers understand and use technology, in part through writing articles on different publications, including the ABA Journal, Above the Law, Daily Record here in Rochester, New York, which is where I'm based, and the MyCase blog. And I prepped for this by rubbing deodorant all around my hairline, so I think I'm gonna be good. We'll see.
And let's see, Steve.
Steve Embry. I write the blog TechLaw Crossroads, and I guess I have graduated from a guest panelist to a regular panelist. So thank you very much. I really enjoy it.
Whether that's a distinction or a dubious distinction, we don't know. But
I was going to say it might fall under the heading "No good deed goes unrewarded."
Exactly right. And last but not least, Molly.
Molly McDonough. I'm a media consultant. I produce Legal Talk Today for the Legal Talk Network and am the former editor and publisher of the ABA Journal.
And Caroline Hill is not able to be with us today because she said the week in legal tech wore her down and she's tired. It's late over there in the UK right now. Just by way of an announcement, we now have an official hashtag. Nikki, you want to introduce our official hashtag?
Well, I initially chose a hashtag and tweeted it, and then thought maybe I better research the hashtag and see if anyone uses it. And it was an active hashtag in legal tech. I initially chose LT Roundtable, and apparently that's taken in legal tech of all things. So I changed it to BA Roundtable because it's Bob Ambrose's Roundtable. So, but it turned out it looks a lot like Bar Ound Table, but that's our official hashtag, Bar Ound Table.
Yeah, whoops, I did that. Yeah, I think that's what we're going for. Is all. I just tweeted to the Bar Ound Table. There's our hashtag. All right, so for topics this week, we were just talking. Since we were all making fun of Rudy Giuliani, where do we even start with that story? Now everybody talked about hair dye, but at least one of the late night comedians was saying maybe it was just Merlot leaking from his pores. So had we considered that possibility?
Well, the New York Times did a whole story about it where they talked to stylists and hairstylist stuff, and they were like, no, it probably wasn't hair dye. It was probably eyeliner or mascara or something, or I think maybe he colored his sideburns or something. So there's a whole industry of stories now that are devoted to trying to figure out what was going on there.
We'll never know the truth.
I just saw a TikTok of Giuliani too. I'm on TikTok. It's a little pathetic, but where they showed him at that same conference, I think, take a handkerchief out of his pocket, wipe his nose, fold it outward so that the part that he just wiped and blown his nose into is in the outside, and then he wiped his whole face off with the part that he'd blown his nose into and put it in his pocket. And he looked sick. I wonder if there was a reason he was sweating so much, and it might not have just been the lights. What if he might have COVID? I don't know. But anyway, he just sort of fell apart at that thing.
Good.
If that gets traction, I feel like TikTok is getting double banned by the current administration now.
Yeah. We just planted Giuliani on TikTok to fool the Chinese government since they're monitoring everything that goes on there, right? His
most recent filing, he asked for, he wants like 1.2 million ballots sent to them. So it's an e-discovery story, sort of. Or a discovery story anyway. He wants 1.2 million ballots sent to him, and then he's, according to the footnote, then he'll take a sample and count them and decide based on that sample to tell the state who actually won. Apparently, no one's really going along with this idea that the solution is to outsource the winner to him, but that is certainly what he's after. And if you're in the discovery biz, you might soon be able to help him, I suppose.
And then go ahead.
Oh, I was going to change topic. Go for it.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a legal tech angle with the court tech of it all as well, considering that AT&T dropped the hearing on the very first day. There were 4,000 people signed up for the call. AT&T, for whatever tech reason, couldn't keep it going. And then everything had to be postponed as they were trying to scramble, and ended up getting 8,000 people back on the call. I thought it was particularly interesting. This is a federal court, and you would think that they would have things in place for especially high profile litigation like this. It kind of didn't make sense to me that it wasn't live stream or live broadcasted in some way to the general public as well. Victoria had a really good piece for us talking with them about kind of their tech issues, but this, especially as everybody's going remote and there are virtual trials, could be something we see for high profile cases moving forward.
Actually, I wrote a post this week on the perils of trying to do court proceedings in a hybrid fashion, where some people are actually present and everybody else participates virtually. And it's a real problem. I'm not talking about sort of everyday sort of motions and hearings, but for an arbitration or a trial, you can't have, it's very difficult to have everybody on equal footing if some of them are present and some of them aren't. And so what you have to do, I discovered, is you really have to set up a number of cameras and a number of microphones so that whenever somebody talks, that there's a camera on that person and you have to set up mechanisms to see the documents. And it's quite a complicated process, because then you have to have a mixer, and you have to have some technicians that know how to balance all those things. And so the problem, of course, is we're backlogging so many trials these days because for obvious reasons. And, at some point we're either going to have to make a decision to do those virtually or keep postponing them until the pandemic is over, or suggest that we do them in a hybrid fashion. But that raises all sorts of complications, because if it's not all equal, then I don't want to participate online. I want to be there in person. If I'm there in person, it complicates the whole thing. So it's, trying to do hybrid type hearings, I think, is going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult in conferences too. You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, when this is over, we'll always have a hybrid conference." But all the audio visuals for that will be complicated as well. So I don't know that where we're going to end up when we can have some in-person proceedings and still have a virtual component.
I thought your post was really interesting because it left me wondering, why do they have to be equal? I mean, the physical trials were never perfect presentation forums for the people, the audience at the trial. I mean, some courtrooms were set up where you'd be able to see documents projected on a monitor, but in most courtrooms, you don't get to see the documents that are being talked about. In a lot of ways, a Zoom trial is almost a better forum for the audience, because you can actually see the witness's face right there. You can see the documents projected up on the screen. But what's wrong if there's a hybrid presentation so the people who choose to go to the courtroom don't get the same experience as the people on Zoom, and people on Zoom get a different experience?
Steve, I just want to throw in just another example of why these hybrids. For me, it's less about the audience and more about the core participants, making sure they have that they're being presented correctly and clearly. So witnesses, the litigants, experts, so that a defense witness doesn't come in super fuzzy and poor connections when a prosecution expert comes in super high quality. And those things can impart some unintentional cues for the judge and the jury potentially.
Yeah,
the analogy that I kept thinking of when I was thinking about Steve's post is that a lot of schools are going to these hybrid models. It's really difficult for the teacher to balance the remote participants with the in-person, and these are students, especially like elementary age students. That's a really tough balance to do. It's one thing for a college professor to do that where they're live streaming and lecturing, but when you have a lot of participation and needs, and you need to pay attention to the people in front of you as equally as the people remotely, that's trickier.
And to get to your point, Bob, I think, yes, it's true that if everybody's in person, access may not be equal. If everybody's online, access might not be equal. But if you have some that can be there and some who can't be there, the ones who can't be there might be tempted to say, well, look, I'm at a disadvantage, so I want to be present in the courtroom. And now you might have, 30 people in a COVID situation wanting to be in the courtroom, and what's the judge to do? Got to delay the trial or order everybody online or order everybody in the courtroom. It's a dilemma. And Molly gets to a good point. There's a lot of sort of equipment kind of things that are necessary and technical kind of things to make that flow smooth, so nobody's due process rights, for example, are impaired in any way.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm thinking more beyond COVID, if there's such a thing, to where we get where we're able to get back to normal in court proceedings. And the question of do we want to get back to normal at that point? Do we want to continue to have both online broadcast and live proceedings in the courtroom? There was a great experiment a few years ago in Massachusetts, that Harvard ran, I think, out of a district court in Massachusetts, putting all their proceedings online. This was 5-6 years ago now. That went really well in a lot of ways, but there were also, most of the glitches were technical, but some of the glitches were just things like people forgetting they're on camera and suddenly saying things that they forget they have a mic on, those kinds of things, and things that shouldn't have been heard, or sidebar conferences that get broadcast that shouldn't have gotten broadcast, and that sort of thing. But I'd like to think that when we get back to actually going into courtrooms, we continue to maintain, if nothing else, then for public accessibility. I think it's great that the public is able to sit in and watch so many of these proceedings now that before they would have had to trudge down to a courtroom. Maybe it's not even near them and they can watch it. The Giuliani trial, technology aside, the telephone connection aside, that was a great example of something that had a lot of public interest.
Well, and there's lots of convenience factors for everybody when you go virtually, not the least of which is the jurors. As I think we've talked about before, we tend to forget these poor jurors that have to travel, to a downtown facility and spend however many days it takes for very little compensation and have their entire lives disrupted. And a virtual component of that might make the whole thing for them, who are really the most important players in the room, right? For them, much easier.
So I think we have this like wonderful segues, because we go from Zach talking about the telephone trouble to you're talking about the hybrid proceedings to judges singing about the fact that they will be back. Joe, do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So fun thing for anyone who hasn't seen it. It's on Above the Law as well as a few other outlets. But down in Texas, they were having the virtual meeting of the Federal Bar Association, and Judge Elrod and Judge Eskridge, Elrod of the Fifth Circuit and Judge Eskridge of the Southern District of Texas, decided that a way in which they could lighten the mood for the poor people who are watching this thing virtually and still kind of, I guess, not really in lockdown because Texas, but if they're, maybe smarter than their government in lockdown in Texas. And so what they did is they put together parody lyrics to Hamilton's song and performed it, and they killed it. I am not a big fan of bad karaoke attempts to make jokes, and they weren't. They were very good. I thought he in particular stole the show. He kind of embodied the character from the original while he was doing it. I thought it was fantastic. You should take some time to go watch this. I guess I can put it in the chat for everybody. Actually,
somebody did
there.
Nikki
Thank
did.
you.
Yep.
Yep, Nikki did it. All right. Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. Just saying that they'll be back, but they do talk about legal tech in there. There's I think one of the better clever lines is that it's not all doom and gloom. We'll just see you over Zoom is what the judges were telling all the practitioners. And very good.
Yeah, I mean, if I were ever to do a music video, you were not the person I would send it to for a critical review. So that says a lot.
At Above the Law, we do this annual contest, the Law Review, spelled VUE. What a lot of law schools have these performances every year where they do this sort of thing, and they send the law schools send us videos of their best submissions, and we judge them. And I've gotten something of a reputation as the mean one because I really think most of them aren't good and aren't funny. But this was fantastic.
Yeah. And plus, what was the law firm that you guys trashed for years? Was it? I think it was a large Boston law firm that got trashed for years for its bad music video or something.
Oh, well, that wasn't even a video. That was just a theme song, and it got so bad that they tried to sue us for putting the YouTube of them singing it on the website and everything. It was really ridiculous. But yeah, everyone's a winner there.
Yeah, that's the one.
Everyone's a winner at Nixon Peabody.
So another way in which there's been sort of a convergence of different stories in the last couple of weeks, I think, is with regard to legal tech marketplaces. And a couple of us have had stories this week that relate to that. I wrote way back in October about the launch of this thing called the Legaltech Hub, which was Nikki Shaver and Chris Ford, who are husband and wife team, launched this Legaltech Hub, which is a pretty ambitious process to create a directory of pretty much all the legal tech products in the world, at least all of those of interest to larger law firms and corporate legal departments. But over the last couple of weeks, there's been a couple of more stories about not exactly legal tech hubs, but legal tech marketplaces of one kind or another. The one I wrote about was the Thomson Reuters launch this week of this marketplace, which they are describing as an online store where users can come and actually sort of demo and try out legal tech products and services before buying them. And then potentially then go ahead and I guess buy them. And you might think this is just Thomson Reuters products. It's not, but as I understand it, it is. All of the products are applications or add-ons that work with Thomson Reuters products. So many of them in particular are add-ons or integrations for HiQ or Elite, the Elite 3E business management product. And I thought that was kind of interesting because there is, one of the big stories over the last year has been the launch of Reign in Court, which is a whole other approach to trying to provide they were calling themselves the App Store of Law, I think is what they've been describing themselves. And they're actually getting ready to roll out a kind of a version of that that's similar in the sense that companies will be able to kind of try before you buy for the apps that are there. They'll have kind of sandbox versions of some of these products So before a company has to sort of really commit to something, we can go in and kind of play around with a sandbox version of it. And then, I know Zach brought it up, but actually Victoria wrote about it. I don't know if one or the other you want to talk about what Oric has done in that regard.
Yeah, Oric last week, they started, I think it was a year ago, their own internal like dashboard and directory of like legal tech products that were available. And they decided to make that available externally as well for clients. And they did say a few like Oric created legal tech will be included, but it's like 600 platform. They said there's maybe like 20 Oric created software there. And they said it's pretty much just software that will help lawyers, not general tech like a Zoom or Blue Jeans or something like that, something that provides pretty general, just helps provide legal services. And I asked them about updating it, and they said it was a lot more easier to keep updated when you have like a platform, like their observatory, which that's the name of their directory of legal tech. It said it's a lot more easier to keep track of all the legal tech companies reaching out to them, sending them press releases saying, hey, look at my software that I just created. So they said it's really good for managing that type of information. And of course, like you can submit, like if you want to be included in the directory, and they'll go over the product. And I think like one of the main things with the directory, and when I looked over it, they emphasize like you have to explain how this actually helps corporate clients. They said that's something that they heard a lot from corporate legal departments that are looking into leveraging legal tech. It's really hard to figure out what does the legal tech actually do and how is it different. And I think kind of like getting lost in like that buzzwords and marketing terms, that's what Oric said they're trying to cut through and provide like a resource so you can have access and reach out to legal tech companies if you're interested in their software. So I think it's interesting, especially because Oric said there's no like point solution out there. So you have so many tech and software that says like, oh, we can do this, we can do that, and not that all in one platform, that you need that type of directory to help you figure out like what's out there.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting things about the Thomson Reuters announcement was the apparent collaboration they're doing with KPMG for some sort of consulting activities. And I don't know if it is relating to supply of or purchase of legal technology or exactly what, but thought that was kind of interesting. Once again, the big fours gradually inching their way into the legal market in the US.
Yeah, that was interesting. And they were not very explicit about that. But I mean, what they said is that it's primarily that KPMG is building applications internally. Their KPM Legal Services, or whatever they call their legal group, is building applications internally to run on the HiQ platform. And so I think it's going to be applications, not services so much, that they're going to be including in that marketplace, as I understood it. But I can't say I'm positive about that.
Yeah, it was not totally clear. That just the interesting thing to me was the kind of the combination of the two, and KPMG's increasing involvement at various levels in the legal ecosystem.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I think KPMG and HiQ had brokered a deal to share some services and have a partnership even before they were purchased by Thomson Reuters. So I think that this is just a little bit of an extension of that.
Oh, okay. I don't know if there's I think part of what this reflects, I would imagine, is just the growing universe of legal technology products. And I think all of these things that we're talking about, the Oric thing, the Thomson Reuters thing, the other directory that I talked about that Nikki Shaver launched, are all kind of focused at big law, big corporate legal departments. And part of the problem is there are just so many products out there now. And I think those responsible for making purchasing decisions are having more and more trouble sorting through them all and making decisions about them all, and even figuring out what the universe is and what's out there. And I think there's a real need for these things. But as Molly commented, I think when we were talking before the show started, that the trick with these is not just launching them, but keeping them current and keeping them up to date. And that's a real challenge.
Yeah, but I like the try before you buy thing, because I mean, I can see how it can be intimidating for a company, especially if they don't if they don't, if this is like their first foray or they're just dipping their toe in, it's like, I don't know when the next time they'll be able to go to a conference is, but the next time they go to a conference and they go to the expo floor and they talk to all these different vendors, all these vendors have these wonderful products that'll do everything that they want and will change everything and save them all kinds of money and do this and do that and do that. And it's like, well, okay, so if they all do these things, then, what's the difference, right? So, I can see why that would be something that would catch on with these various companies. But like your conference girlfriend Bob just said in the chat, it'll be interesting to see what the statistics will be like in a few months. And so I think that will bear watching, especially to see if they keep up to date with these things, like what Molly said, and what everyone else was talking about with just regards to keeping these things up to date and whether or not they're even catching on.
Vic, I was trying to figure out whether you're being sarcastic. If only there were some technology that would help me with that.
Well, so is that segue?
You're killing it today.
To my thing?
Killing it today.
That's a segue.
All right. So yeah, I saw this because we've talked a little bit about this in the past about how AI has difficulty trying to determine sarcasm in text and images and text and images and whatnot. And so there was an article that came out this week looking at how I guess researchers in China have developed this way of looking at text and images together to determine whether or not there's sarcasm there. And I mean, I mainly picked it because I love the headline. It said AI researchers make a sarcasm made a sarcasm detection model, and it's so impressive. And just reading through the article, I didn't know if the whole article was meant to be sarcastic or it was just a headline. So maybe this proves the difficulty of detecting sarcasm, because even I was having trouble with it at times. But I think it was I think that this new method was a 2.7 improvement on the prior one. I'm just like, that doesn't seem like a major breakthrough. It doesn't seem like a lot. So maybe the whole article was meant to be sarcastic and therefore to kind of illustrate the difficulties in really determining, because if humans had trouble with it, then how can machines be able to discern these things? So I mean, I just thought it was a very good kind of possibly meta article about sarcasm detection in general and how it still continues to befuddle, even the most advanced AI.
I feel like we should have more meta articles in legal tech in general. Like, just have a document creation software just literally create an article about itself and just see if anybody can tell the difference. I think that'd be fun.
I did once. I think I might have even mentioned this on the show once. But when one of my sons, not the one who helps produce the show, but my other son was playing around with some AI software, and I gave him a text file with all of the columns I'd ever written for Above the Law, and asked if he could generate a column for me without me having any input. And it came out as gobbledygook, which is probably an accurate representation.
and it's the highest trafficked column on the history of Above the Law.
No, I didn't publish it. I did not publish it. But I would like to try it again sometime. Okay, from sarcasm to, I don't know, avatar conferences?
Well, all right,
everybody, buckle up.
Because I sound like a broken record, I also submitted an article that I'd written as well that was not about avatar conferences. So, I actually like a legit thing about email and the ethical issues people need to think about.
We can do that.
So, can I talk about that really quickly so I don't sound like a psychotic avatar-focused person? So I wrote an article on my sui generis, for the Daily Record that I republished on the sui generis column, and it just caught my eye because it was a blog post written by Florida's Ethics Council. It wasn't an official opinion, but it talked about some of the issues that you encounter with email when you use it to communicate with clients and also opposing counsel. This has been addressed before by other ethics bars, but at the end of the day, it just highlighted one more issue with email, which is that when you CC clients, you run into two different ethical issues. One is that the clients may reply all and inadvertently disclose confidential information. The other is that you put opposing counsel in the bind of possibly impermissibly communicating with someone represented by counsel once you CC them in if they should reply all. So it just is another example of, even when you're not talking about the security issues with email, there are other issues of confidentiality that may arise. And it's just one more reason why, now that we're all working remotely and are relying on our electronic communications even more, it's better to just switch to some sort of secure, more secure way to communicate. I always say client portals, but there's obviously encrypted email as well, but then you still run into some of those CCing issues. So I thought that was really interesting and timely. But I also, Rick George is a lawyer in Florida. He has a blog called Future Lawyer. And of course, it caught my eye when he published a short post talking about how he thinks the future of conferences are avatars. And I was so excited because that's what I think they are. And then Steve was kind enough to send me a link to, there's actually a legal tech conference coming up that's going to be avatar based. And it's free. You can sign up. So of course I signed up. And I'll put a link to that in case anyone wants to attend it. It's, e-discovery is not my jam, but this isn't, it's avatar and it's legal tech, so I'm there. It's edrmsexpo.com. It's on December 3rd. And it is an avatar based conference. So essentially you create an avatar and then you get to wander around and you're with your avatar. And listen, the reason I think this is so exciting is because it gamifies conferences. Right now, we're all zoomed out. We stare at a screen all day. Then you go to conferences and you stare at a screen all day. And sure, you get to kind of talk to people sometimes at the conference, but this way it gamifies it. It makes it fun. You have this avatar that you have to create and it just shakes the experience up. And then in theory, this is what I'm thinking. I want to experience it. You walk around and you can talk to people. You can just pick random people, walk up to them. And I just feel like that's kind of more interesting than sitting there and joining a Zoom room and seeing a bunch of names. And so I'm super excited. And I honestly think that it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel here with these vaccines that may be coming out. So maybe we won't be in this for next year, but at least for the next 6 months, this is going to be an issue. So why not shake these conferences up a little bit? And maybe it will be a way to have, you may have a conference every year, certain companies, but maybe sometimes you throw in a conference halfway through the year that's just an online avatar conference. It's a way to stay connected with your customers, with people in the legal tech community, without throwing a full-blown conference, all the time. So I think it's exciting, and hopefully some other people will be there with me and Steve. Steve, I think you said you're going, right? So
yeah, I'm going, and I actually went to the developer site, the people that are putting it on, and kind of looked at it, and it really does kind of look like a video game, like the Legend of Zelda, where you push the little thing and the little guy runs around and does certain things. So it'll be really interesting. I think it's kind of got some potential. I don't know about the kind of the presentation end of things. That seemed a little flunky to me, but the exhibit hall kind of thing, that could work.
Is that using the same tech that Rick George has written about, the same platform, or is that?
I think it's different. Don't you, Nikki? I think it's different.
Yeah, I think it's different. There's a handful of them out there, and they all seem to do the same thing. You can walk up to other people, interact with them, or talk to people at your table while there's a talk going on, and also have these breakout groups where everybody walks into the room. But there's a reason they talk about gamifying things. And this is the perfect time to gamify online legal conferences, since we don't have any other option, and make it just a little bit, because I know that people are zoomed out. I understand from talking to people in the industry that CLE numbers are starting to decline, because during the initial quarantine, everybody was taking CLEs because they had nothing else to do. They thought they'd get their credits in. And at this point, everyone's zoomed out and they're just tired of looking at a screen all the time. And that doesn't bode well for the conferences over the next 6 months, I don't think. So
I was just about to tell people they should go watch the Zoom video I recorded with you earlier this week talking about legal ethics in the time of COVID, but I'm going to retract that suggestion right now.
Well, that was fascinating. So I don't know.
No, that actually was interesting. That was actually fun because we talked about things like, some of the things we talked about in this show before, but can a lawyer withdraw from a case because of fear of COVID, or what was the other? I'm blanking on the other. Anyway, that's up on my blog as of today, and you can find my interview with Nikki there.
It was all the ABA Journal column wrap up from all the columns I'd written about over the past year, wasn't it? Or were you talking about ethics specific? I'm not sure.
Doesn't matter.
We talked about that too.
Our interview was both ethics and essential work from home technology that everybody should know about. So, Molly, what do you got this week?
So I just kind of along the lines of some of the things we've talked about already today. There was a future of the courts post-pandemic commission in New York, and they came out with some recommendations. And I think this kind of goes to the point you were making, Bob. It wasn't looking at some of these bigger case changes, but they were looking at, implementing things that like small claims, online dispute resolution for small claims courts, things like that we're seeing in other places that have already been tested or shown some really good use cases. So I thought that was interesting. It's just a recommendation at this point, but it comes from a pretty strong constituency. So I'm thinking that that'll move things forward, partly out of necessity as backlogs are dealt with and the pandemic issues continue on. And then back to conferences. Caroline's not here to talk about it, but she hosted a webinar, Legal IT Insider with ILTA, on lessons learned from virtual conferences. And there was a lot of discussion about the things we've just been talking about fatigue and engagement, and and some of it comes back down to a lot of the things you deal with when you're putting together a story or a marketing campaign. What is it that we're putting a conference on for in the first place? Coming back to that baseline and rethinking how to make that happen in a virtual environment. And then, the things that come along, to add engagement and, make sure that education and networking are core, that vendors get the support they want. What I thought was interesting was that a lot of the data that ILTA has been collecting is really still focused on the education component. So even though we hear a lot of talk about engagement and bells and whistles, to me, it seems like the focus should still be on how you create a really strong education component that's meaningful and seamless. And so there was a lot of discussion about that. One of the things, so I attended most of a conference this week put on by Pro Bono Net and some partners called Decolonizing Justice. And one of the things they did, and Stephen has seen this in other conferences, is they had a live note taker who, it wasn't an AI product, which also exists to do transcriptions live so that you can follow along, but it was somebody who was taking notes, really nice highlight notes, so that I found it incredibly useful, because sometimes you get engaged and you miss something somebody said, or what happened to me a few times. I had to take a call, duck out, and then I got to go look through the notes, and then was totally back on track for the Q&A later. I understood what was being discussed. I thought that was really useful. And the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated how, what they'll do at the end of this conference is send everybody the videos. Well, who actually watches those after a conference? A week-long conference, are you really going to go sit through or filter through even the one session you were interested in? I don't know, but I would totally skim notes, like,
right.
Crib sheet notes. So
yeah,
I thought that was really neat. And they also did simultaneous translation in Spanish for most of the key programs.
Yeah, I've seen that used.
Victoria just won Rate My Skype Room, if anybody noticed.
I've seen that used.
Thank you, Courtney.
We've got multiple people speaking at the same, in a panel discussion or a discussion with a big group. To have a note taker is really cool, because you can't keep track of who's talking fast enough if you're trying to do it yourself.
Yeah. I a couple of notes on that one. I've heard talk that there's a group possibly getting together of vendors to meet and talk about what to do about virtual trade shows, and not invite any of the organizers of virtual trade shows to that meeting. Try and come up with some kind of a vendor approach, because a lot of vendors are very unhappy with the state of affairs. And another sort of small world or segue or something issue is that New York report, that New York Commission that you talked about, Molly. There's a couple of different committees to it, and I'm actually on one of them. There's also a separate technology working group that's working through looking at how the New York courts should redesign their websites or have a better web presence than they do now. And the whole reason I'm on that committee is because I went to Nikki Black's dinner at Legaltech New York that MyCase holds every year, and happened to sit next to a person who's the chair of this committee. And next thing I know, I'm roped into a committee on the New York courts, even though I'm based in Massachusetts. So that makes a lot of sense.
I think I know who that was.
I'm sure you do. What else? Did we have anything else?
I've got something. I think we would be remiss if we didn't note that yesterday was the 18th anniversary of Bob Ambrose's blog that got many of us, certainly me, got started with reading that blog and being energized by it. And one of the first times I was introduced to Bob, he was described as the godfather of legal tech. So I think 18 years at doing anything, but particularly doing a blog, ought to be celebrated and congratulated, and it's certainly worth noting by everybody. So thanks, Bob, for 18 years of hard work, and hope you got 18 years more in you.
It's the best argument for avatars yet. I think. At least I could look 20 years younger, but thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. And it's been a lot of fun doing it. But my Italian heritage finally gets me something. Was there anything else that people want to talk about? I feel like there was something
I just threw something into the chat. My ABA Journal column in December is going to be about the top 5 legal tech stories, and I sort of crowdsourced that already on social media, but I had intended to ask all my co-panelists, and I'm certainly interested in obviously what any attendees think. So if anyone has any votes, feel free to either let me know offline or in the chat, or otherwise. I'm just trying to get a sense of what the community in general thinks, legal tech space thinks were the biggest stories. Make sure I cover all my bases.
Yeah. I will look forward to reading that. I'm already getting, do you guys all get the pitches from PR people saying, if you're doing a future of what's going to happen in 2021 story, let us know and we'll get you some expert who's going to tell you. I hate future stories myself. I like retrospective stories because you can, that's real. You can talk about it and look at it. I hate stories trying to prognosticate about what's coming down the pike over the next year.
To be clear, mine's the top 5 of 2020.
Yeah.
So I'm
I know. I'm looking forward
I'm just
to that.
interested in what people think are
and I'll be doing the same.
My next story that I was going to assign you was going to be the top 5 of 2021 that's due the next month. So you got to come up with 5.
It's hard to see how the top legal tech story of 2020 isn't the coronavirus, by the way.
Somehow, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And didn't we all think
Courtney says future stories are written so we can laugh about them 10 years later, which is so true.
And didn't we all think in December of last year, like 2020, the start of a new decade, everything's going to be great. 2020, and just look at what's been so much. Yeah. So.
Where did our
I'm starting to.
get us?
I'll throw in a future prediction that on John Broder's questions that UPL is going to be front and center for 2021 again, especially with a lot of the regulatory changes in Utah, Arizona, Minnesota. We're going to see it now in New York with some of these recommendations. Florida's coming along. So I think these are all going to be issues that we'll either see in sandboxes or coming up in litigation.
I think that's a safe bet. Sort of like that the Patriots will be in the Super Bowl.
I don't.
My Eagles
I
are
don't know
pretty
if you
bad
should-
this year, so
Yeah.
you know.
I don't
that's
think
okay.
I don't think either of you should be watching TV right now because it doesn't look good for either.
Yeah. All right.
As a
all right,
Steelers
yeah.
fan, on the other hand,
Yeah.
No,
Right.
no, I worry the Steelers are peaking a little too soon. I
I
actually
think that's
don't-
true.
I actually have no. I would not put money on them being in the Super Bowl.
I agree. I actually am thinking the same thing.
All right. We are not going to be here next week. We are going to take the day after Thanksgiving off, but we will be back the week after that, whatever date that is. I have no idea. And hope to see you all back then. And hope you all have a great Thanksgiving to the extent you're able to do that. And see you back in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody, for being part of it today.
Bye, everyone.
Well,
Happy holidays.
Everybody.
Stay safe.